We are going to specifically cover 3 different types of Excel charting techniques. Number 1 is interactivity, number 2 is highlights, and number 3 is storytelling. You can think of these 3 things as 3 steps on a ladder. Each step will take you to a higher level in terms of your business reporting and data analysis capabilities. Let's go over to Excel where I have got some sample data, and then we will show these 3 techniques. Here is an Excel file with some sample data. This is a made up data for a fictional chocolate company called Awesome Chocolates that I use in many of my examples. So here we have salesperson, geography, and amounts, but you could imagine this for any kind of data. It doesn't even have to be sales data. So it could be student enrollments, or it could be finance data, it could be operational data. It doesn't matter. As you can clearly see, we have quite a lot of data. So about 300 rows and many values. If I want to make a graph from this, it is going to look very clunky and busy. So for example, I'm going to just select everything and insert a chart. As you could clearly see, this doesn't tell any story at all. One way of taking this to the next level is we could, for example, create a pivot table from it so that we can see the total value of each geography and each salesperson. So that's what we will do. We will insert a pivot table. You can insert it anywhere. I'm just going to insert into the existing sheet somewhere here so that we can quickly see this. Let's put geography. Within geography, each salesperson, and then amount. As you can see, we operate in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 geographies, and we have 10 salespeople within each geography. So 60 different values are what we are talking about. So maybe a graph from this is going to look better. So we will insert another graph, and this is what you will end up with. Not really bad, but at the same time, it is a little clunky to read. Maybe if I move geography to the legend, we'll get something like this. So for each person, each geography is one color, and we will end up with a graph like this. This is something that you might have seen or used or even made in your life as a data analyst. So this is our starting step, or we could think of this as step 0. And from here, I'm going to show you 3 different techniques so that we can tell a better story from our data. I'm going to do a quick sneak peek of what these 3 levels are going to look like. So this is actually a completed file. So our level 1 will introduce you to the concept of interactivity so that I can pick any particular geography and then see the data for that. Our level 2 will introduce concepts of how to highlight things so that you can show the top 3 or bottom 3 performers in the data for any specific geography. So I can go to Canada, India, or New Zealand. And our final level will transform that into a nice little data story. Let's go and build these 3 graphs, and along the way you will learn many techniques. I added a new worksheet. I'm just going to call this as level 1, and we'll select this particular chart that we already made, Control X, and paste it here. As we can clearly see, this chart does have all the data, but it is quite busy and clunky. So we need to decide what sort of information you want to present, and then accordingly go about designing the charts. So for the purpose of our examples from here on, I'm just assuming that we want to focus on the salesperson performance and then tell the story from their perspective. So because the story needs to have salesperson as the focus points, we'll put salespersons on the x-axis here, and then we will add countries as a selection mechanism. So instead of showing all the 6 values for each person all the time, I want to make a selection so that I can pick an individual geography and then see who is doing what within that geography. So we don't need the geography here. We can come back here and remove the geography from the graph so that we are only looking at salesperson level. Because this pivot table and this pivot chart are made from one another, if you make the changes to pivot table, the pivot chart will also change. At this level, we are looking at the total performance, and while it does look all right, it is kind of looking all over the place because the salespersons are arranged in the alphabetical order. Because we are focusing on the salesperson performance, an easy win for us here would be just sorting this data on the amount itself. So to do that, right click on the amount within the pivot table, sort largest to smallest, so that the best performing salesperson goes to the front and the lowest amount goes to the bottom. And now our graph looks like this. Let's adjust some of these other things. There is kind of superfluous labels all over the place. We don't need the word total here. And we also don't need any of these buttons. So select this graph, go to Pivot Chart Analyze, and field buttons, turn them off. Next, we want to have a clear title. Total is kind of a very lame title. So double click on that and let's give it a proper title. The title could be Sales Amount by Person. Next, let's add some interactivity here so that I can select an individual geography and then see the performance for that. To do this, we can use the slicer feature. So we'll go back to the pivot table. From the pivot table field list, right click on geography and add it as a slicer. You can think of slicer as a visual filter. Each button on the slicer represents one possible value, and you can click on any button. So if I select Canada, I'm seeing the amounts for Canada. The beauty of slicer is it not only controls the pivot table, but if you have any pivot charts, they will also be controlled. So we need the slicer next to the chart. So once the slicer is added, Control X this and Control V it here. We'll just move it nice and close to the chart, arrange its size, and then there is our interactive chart. I can pick an item and then see this. Notice what happens to the sort order. Gigi Bowling is the number 1 person, but if I go to a different geography, I will see another person here. This is because we have set the sorting to be on the total amount. So at that point, when we pick New Zealand, values change and pivot table will reapply the sort order, moving Chesbonel to the front. Let's adjust some of the formatting here so that everything looks nice and good. So one thing that we could quickly do is adjust the formatting. These are amounts in dollar. So let's add that. To do this, we need to go back to the pivot table and right click on the amount, add number format, currency, 0 decimal points. So they'll come up here as currency. Because the pivot chart is made from that pivot table, it will trickle down here. Next up, I'm going to pick my axis and I'm going to change the limit from 5,000 to 10,000 so that there is not too much density here. To format the axis, select the axis and press Ctrl 1 and that will open the format options here. So from here, major unit, we will change this to 10,000 so that there is fewer values here. Next up, I will change the color to a light color. And then finally, I want to change these names. So they are currently at an angle. And this is very hard for us to read when you present in a big room or print it out. So I'm going to change the orientation to horizontal. So select this axis from home using this button, orientation button. We'll need to click on this once and then click on it again. So that will change the orientation. If you adjust the font size, you will be able to see everyone's names. Finally, I want to also make these columns a little bit thicker. There is too much white space. So select the columns, go to Format Data Series, and let's put the gap width at 50%.